This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Brodhead Chapter Trout Unlimited. Before we get started with our guest speaker, I got a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow, February 13th at 9 a.m., Pocono Heritage Land Trust is looking for volunteers at the Pomeroy Nature Preserve. If you're interested, you can register at phlt.org. On Monday, February 15th, we are having our Brodhead Fly Tires meeting at the Brodhead Creek Heritage Center at 6 p.m. If you wish to come, we do have to limit attendance to 25 people, and you must have a mask to enter the Brodhead Heritage Center. On Saturday, February 27th, the Pocono Heritage Land Trust is holding another work day at the Fieldstone Farm Preserve from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Once again, you can register at phlt.org. And now I'm going to turn on Ann's mic as soon as I find Ann. There you are. Ann, you may have to turn your own mic on. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah, I'm pinch hitting for Todd Burns tonight. Todd is our advocacy chair. He couldn't be here, so I'm going to pinch hit a few things that are going on. We're more than a fishing club. We advocate for our cold water resources, and we do that through many avenues. We're partners with the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, which is real important in protecting land and water throughout the Delaware River watershed. And it's also very important for procuring funding. We were one of the early members of this organization, probably going back at least 6 or 7 years. We were one of the early groups to sign on, and they've procured a lot of funding to help protect land and waters in the Delaware River watershed. We're also members of the Our Pocono Waters campaign, which is a campaign to really educate businesses and the public about exceptional value streams, dispel some misconceptions about them, and really try to get everyone on board with just how valuable they are, not only to our fishing resources, but to the human health and the economy of the area. So those are two organizations we team with. Briefly, a few things that are going on, not a whole lot right now. We're keeping our eye on Harrisburg. There's some concern about budget, monies in the budget that have been in the past designated towards environmental programs being pulled to help meet some budget deficits. So we're keeping an eye on that. I always say keep an eye on Harrisburg. Always keep an eye on Harrisburg. One thing that's going on in the Aquashicola Creek area of the county, over at Eric Gustav's end of the county, there was a stream upgrade petition filed, I think it was 2009 or 2010, to an exceptional value. It was an seeking exceptional value status for those waters. It's sat in the DEP since 2011, which is not unusual. However, in our weekly email that goes out, the information is there from February the 8th. We're actually urging our members to contact the DEP, and a link is provided, asking them to, pull that petition up, get some movement going on that. It's been almost 10 years since it's moved throughout the very extensive channels in Pennsylvania that you need to upgrade protections on a stream. And I think one other general announcement, I don't know if this truly advocacy, is one of our members, chapter members, Craig Todd was actually elected by the county commissioners to a director position on the Monroe County Conservation District Board, which is well deserved, and he'll bring a plethora of knowledge and experience to that position. Todd and I are both participating later this month, not too much later. I'm trying to find my calendar, and let me open this up here, in a environmental legislative briefing. So we've both signed up for that. So next month's meeting, undoubtedly we'll have a better feel for where the current state legislators are going as far as environmental issues and bills that are going through that may affect our water quality in this part and throughout the state. So we'll have more information next month. And I think I've rambled on long enough. Take a look at that email that went out February the 8th. Links to all of this stuff in there.
You're on mute, Eric.
Problem with two buttons. Okay, we are starting a Stream Girls program as a new program. Stream Girls is a program in which we would partner with the Girl Scouts to provide a science, technology, recreation, engineering, art, and math program for the Girl Scouts. If you're interested in learning more about the program or possibly volunteering, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Okay, a couple of quick ground rules for tonight. You'll be muted for the duration of the program. We may open it up at the end for people to speak into the questions, but if you have a question, you don't want to forget it, type it to the chat window and I will read them I'll read them off at the end as they come. And if you need a follow-up, we can unmute you and open up the discussion. The reason for our presentation tonight is this summer we're looking to do some work on the headwater streams of the Paradise Creek watershed. And one of the methodologies we're looking into is what they call a chop and drop style of habitat improvement. And to learn more about this, we've invited Luke Bobnar, a fellow TU member, and the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy watershed scientist in the Upper Allegheny and Lake Erie region. So without any further ado, I will turn the meeting over to Luke.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll jump right into it. I might have to, there we go. Can you see that all right? And is the go-to meeting stuff in the way? No? Okay, cool. So as Eric mentioned there, I'm Luke Bobnar, watershed scientist for Western Pennsylvania Conservancy out of Ridgeway, PA. I primarily work in the Clarion and Allegheny River watersheds in Western PA. And a lot of that is encompassed by the Allegheny National Forest. If you're unfamiliar with the Conservancy, there we go. We're a regional nonprofit based out of Pittsburgh, PA, and started in 1932. There's a number of different programs that we have. I work in the watershed conservation program. We also have a land stewardship program that helps protect land in perpetuity. We help manage the state natural heritage database, and we also have a gardens and green spaces program that if you've been to Pittsburgh or Erie, some of the main drags that you drive in on, we've got gardens there, hanging baskets and stuff. And we also are the stewards of Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water down in Fayette County. If you haven't been there, it's something pretty cool to see and check out. So just to give you an idea of where I'm at in the state, where Ridgeway is the southeast corner of the Allegheny National Forest there. And the southern border is basically the Clarion River, and then the northern border is the Allegheny. I work on the forest, off the forest with public and private partners. The proclamation boundary is about 1 million acres, but there's only about 500,000 acres of it that are actually public national forest. It was created in 1923 to produce a sustained yield of marketable timber forever, and then also for watershed protection for downstream communities, for clean drinking water as well as flood protection. And the work that we do helps all of those goals for the forest. On the forest, they spearhead a group called the Allegheny Watershed Improvement Needs Coalition, or the Allegheny Winds Coalition, where we meet a couple times a year and work with partners, like county conservation districts, state, tribal, local governments, watershed associations, TU chapters, basically anybody that wants to have a helping hand in improving water quality in our region. We're happy to work with them. And if not for some of the wonderful partners that we have, I wouldn't be, as experienced as I am or here with you today. There's a few of the very active partners in the WINS Coalition. And then I'd like to thank the people that help, pay my salary and pay the heavy equipment operators and stuff to get out there and do the work that we do. Okay, with those formalities out of the way, into the meat of the presentation. So this is an artist rendering of northwestern Pennsylvania in the late 1700s. I know it's just, a painting, but we don't have photographs. We have, anecdotal accounts from back in the day when our state, Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, was old growth forest. And looking at it, you can see there's a diversity of tree sizes and age classes and species. And when those trees fell, they had a huge impact on our aquatic ecosystems. And when people think of a stream ecosystem, they often think single channel. But when you have a well-aged, mature, old-growth forest, you often get valley-wide, multi-thread, multi-channel ecosystems that are, dependent on those trees falling in. Progress came, as it always does, and we cut all the trees down in an industrial fashion, working our way across the state. We needed that timber to build America, and then we went back for the smaller trees and turned them into chemicals and used the bark to tan all the buffalo hides that were coming back from out west. And when there weren't many roads around, the way you got those big trees to market was dragging them downhill and putting them into timber rafts and taking them downstream. This is a picture of the Clarion River downstream of Arroyo. This picture was taken probably less than 10 miles from where I live right now, and it's pretty incredible to think about, those log rafts that are 30 feet wide and 170 feet long, and going from here, down to as far as New Orleans. That we're taking this that far. But to use a river as a highway, which many of our rivers in the state were designated by the legislature as highways in the mid 1800s. In those acts, they also designated river improvement companies, river navigation companies, and those companies were authorized to make them highways. And they'd blow up boulders, blow up log jams, and it was great for industrial commercial transport of materials, but it wasn't really great for fish habitat and aquatic ecosystems. And additionally, at the same time the timber rafting was going on, railroads were also coming into power. And this is a copy of one of ye olden maps. But if you look at it, you can tell that almost every stream valley has a railroad in it. And a lot of the time what they did is they just moved the stream wherever they needed to, and it disconnected floodplains, disconnected side channels that were super important for the function of those ecosystems. But there was so much of it, and it was such an endless area that we thought the good times would never end. But here we are today, and here we are. This is one of the streams I work on. This is the east branch of Tionesta Creek outside of Ludlow. Looking at that picture, it's a fairly beautiful picture. You might see something like this up on somebody's wall somewhere, but I know many of you folks are anglers, and when you look at that picture as an angler or a fish, you don't want to spend much time there. There's probably 60 feet bank to bank, and it's 6 inches deep, a warm bathtub. And this is one of the legacies, the environmental legacies that we've been left with of that stream cleaning, where they were, log driving or log rafting, or even pulling old timber out of the streams to cut up into saw timber. And if you look on the right side of that picture, there's like one larger tree. It's like a 16-inch diameter tree. If that tree, if and when it falls, if there's not a whole bunch of other trees in that stretch to help buffer flood flows, it is going to wind up heading downstream, and it's probably going to wind up lodging against the bridge somewhere. And this is how we get the negative reinforcement of our views of wood, why people want to see clean streams today. They go down, they get lodged on bridges and culverts, they flood people's houses and cause all kinds of problems. And that just reinforces that negative stereotype. And then somebody goes and cuts them up a little bit with a chainsaw, they flush through and become somebody else's problem downstream. But I'm here today to tell you that wood is good. It's great. It's necessary and natural in aquatic ecosystems. I think this picture is a lot more beautiful than the one I showed of that structureless stream a few frames ago. One of the benefits we see wood providing as anglers is cover for fish. Anything from a small limb that might hide a young of the year trout from a larger, from a kingfisher or something, up to large logs. It also helps hold back the leaf pack. Instead of getting washed downstream into a reservoir, it's held closer to where that energy, that leaf pack, was produced, so that macroinvertebrates can eat it and then fish can eat the macroinvertebrates. Pools are created. On the upstream side, you often get a backwater pool where sediment drops out, and on the downstream side, you get a plunge pool. And when the water falls off of that log, hits the bottom, it excavates it out, and as that water travels downstream and loses energy, the sediment gets sorted. So you get these pool tail crests towards the end of them that have spawning gravels in them, and that's where our brook trout and the wild brown trout that we have create their nests. So super important to have those there. Making side channels is where those little fish go once they hatch to get away from the larger fish. And it also, you think about a valley as a linear system, you've just doubled your linear area of fish habitat in that valley. We call them floodplains for a reason, especially when you do this in headwater areas. It puts water onto the floodplains. The water soaks in and comes out as base flows later in the year, and it alleviates, it brings down peak flood flows, so it represents protection for downstream communities as well. A jam like this might hold back a couple hundred or a couple thousand gallons in a large storm event. We try to have a minimum of like 70 jams per mile. So if each one's holding back 10,000 gallons of water, that's a lot of water that isn't in town right now. And then of course the structural diversity of trees, like I mentioned, from fine limbs to large limbs, tree boles, large roots and fine roots. It's a whole bunch of diversity for macroinvertebrates and fish to utilize. So we knew where we were, the disturbance that happened, and then why it might be good to start returning to those pre-disturbance conditions. And how do we do that? The easiest method, we're doing it all right now, all of us in all of our streams, just by not cleaning them out. Natural tree mortality, trees fall into streams from ephemeral channels into large rivers. But when we want to start taking an active role, it's a little bit better in my eyes. If we let things up to nature, it's going to be decades, if not centuries, till we return to more natural conditions. So when we want to start taking an active hand, we can do that with hand tools on maybe small ephemeral channels, brushing them in, and then as they start to turn into more perennial channels, it's a little bit more effective and less time consuming to use a chainsaw and just directionally fell trees into stable configurations. Once you hit about 20 feet in bank full width on your stream, you want to start making sure that you use some sort of winching apparatus or make sure that you're going to make your structure stable, and you often have to use a winch to do that if you're doing it by hand. and up past 40 feet in bank full width. I don't often work by hand in those streams. You have to get out the Tonka toys, and often you're entrenching structures and making sure that they're stable, they're not going to blow out. And then once you move into your larger river systems, you're probably going to be talking to engineering firms, consultants, to make sure you have an adequate factor of safety to secure your structure and make sure it's not going to impact anybody else in that floodway. You heard me mention bank full width there a couple of times. Bank full width is the width of a stream at which it starts spilling onto its floodplain. And when you are putting trees in, a good rule of thumb is your key pieces, so the pieces that are going to be very stable in that system, have to be 2 times your bank full width. So looking at this stream, it's about 15 feet. We'd need a 30-foot long tree of, say, 8 to 10 inch average diameter along that whole 30-foot length to be a stable key piece in that system. And also you see that jam is complex. Complexity in these structures is stability. So you might have a few smaller pieces like slash and tree tops, and then ballast them in place with larger key pieces that are 2 times or more your bank full width. I've talked about safety quite a bit here. Safety in keeping your structures in place so they don't impact people downstream, as well as when you're going out to do this, make sure you have qualified individuals working for you, wearing good PPE, following safe practices. It's an incredible technique and it's a lot of fun, but remember that there's large trees that are coming down. Sometimes widowmakers come out of them. Make sure you're doing it safely. Okay, with all the safety caveats out of the way, let's look at some streams we've worked on. This is Salmon Creek near Marionville, on the southwesternish border of the forest. About a 15-foot bank full width here. I believe that the prior land use was log driving in this section. It's big, flat, and open. In the 30s, the CCCs came through, and on the right-hand side of that photo, they planted a big red pine plantation. It's nice. You can shoot down those long rows of pine if you're hunting in there, but as far as ecosystem services, they really don't do much for terrestrial or aquatic systems. So we were able to come in and harvest some of them and fall them into the stream. You'll notice that a bunch of that tree, some of that tree is contacting the stream, primarily the branches, but a bunch of it is up, and when the flood flows come, that provides ballast because it's something that's not going to float away. And within the first year, we're already accumulating mobile woody debris that would have just flushed out of that system. We're getting floodplain reconnection. And then another year after that, we had beavers move in. And for the third log structure down, they built a dam and raised our stream surface elevation. And the young lady in this photo is about 5'8", 5'9"-ish. And the top of that beaver dam is right at her shoulders, so right handy to 5 feet tall. In a few short months, we gained like 5 feet in elevation. So it's awesome. It's awesome fish habitat. It's awesome habitat for a variety of species, but also if you have roads that are low in elevation in valleys where you're doing this, and especially if you have beavers in those valleys, it's a concern to take into consideration. Another thing, like I mentioned, using the large pieces of wood, it's chop and drop, not buck and chuck. If you can move those pieces of wood, the stream can probably move those pieces of wood too. So we want to avoid that and certainly be very careful about how we're felling. I would rather see another tree dropped into this one to bring it down than fence posting it like that. And I can make fun of that one too, because that was me that did that one. At the bottom of our reaches where we are doing the directional felling, chop and drop style, we'll put in 1 to several catcher structures, catcher drams that are just, they look like a mess. And a lot of people would see them and say, oh, that's terrible looking. But to me, as from an ecology perspective, that is a beautiful mess. From a fish's perspective, that's beautiful, or a fisher, or a grouse, or a deer. But as you start moving into those larger stream systems, you want to start using a little bit more equipment. We use pack frames pretty heavily to pack in, gas, oil, chainsaw, and then on the bottom right is our grip hoist. It's got a 2-ton pulling capacity, and then we add pulleys and blocks into it that we get up to 4, 6, 8 tons of pulling capacity, depending on how effective we are in rigging it. It's not a super fast method. It moves a maximum of about 6 to 7 feet per minute, but you can really put the power to stuff. And in the top right, that's a Pulaski and a Pro Hoe there. We use those to dig around the roots of trees, cut the roots, and pull whole trees over and winch the root wad into the stream. I love root wads. I wish I could put more of them into streams. They're an incredible habitat feature, and they also make a tree really stable in the stream. Working with the Forest Service, they have a gas-powered capstan rope winch, and it's a heck of a lot faster, but it doesn't have the power that the grip hoist has. It moves stuff very fast, but you have to be very careful how you rig your pulleys, and watch out for rope rub. If you are considering getting into rigging for things, so the pulley and the capstan winch, the pulley, and then the tree that it's anchored on, they form a triangle. We call that the triangle of death, or the TOD. If something fails in that pulley system, the pulley is going to shoot straight out the vector of that triangle, and you don't want to be there. So we're very careful about doing that, and the same thing is true for using the pulleys with the grip hoist as well. When you use that type of stuff, you're able to wedge trees in between trees. I call this the single pin log, where we've added some slash to the stream and then felled a tree and wedged it in between live trees. When you have the flow coming from the left-hand side, it wedges that tree into position, and it takes breaking that tree to get it to move. And you get a backwater pull on the upstream side and a plunge pull on the downstream side. And this is what that looks like out in the field. I should have left a little bit more of this tree hanging off the back side, which is toward us in the bottom of the picture. Flow in this picture is from left to right. This is one we put in 2016. I think this picture was taken in the spring of 2017. A few years later, it's accumulated several feet of material, both in the stream and up on the floodplain, mobile sediment, mobile smaller woody debris. And going back to that picture, look at the channel on the downstream, the right side of that log that's pinned there, and watch it change as we start to collect sediment and sediment bars on the downstream side as well. This is just last fall at that same log. We're getting all sorts of recruitment of what you might call wild woody pieces in there. And this structure is a bear to electrofish, but you can see large fins way back in up under it. You just can't get them. Here's pulling out a root wad. This is one of the larger sizes that we're able to work with to uproot and move to the stream. Guy in that picture is about 6'2", and the tree is probably a 10 or 12 inch diameter cherry. We're starting to expand that technique. I started bringing in the ladder steps from a tree stand so I can rig the pulley up higher. You can see on the bottom we've started to grub out some of the dirt before we start cutting the roots. And that tree is about 18 inches, maybe 20 inches in diameter. When it came up, it brought probably a 4-ton root wad with it, and this was planned not to move. We'd done chop and drop and added trees into the stream and also up onto the floodplain, and this is one of the last pieces that we added. We did not cut the roots on the stream side of the tree, we left them intact. So not only is there 4 tons of ballast right there, plus whatever's in the tree, probably another 3-4 tons, it's also connected through natural root rebar to the bank. Like you could see in that structure I was just showing, there was a lot of trees on the ground, and more I'm moving to more complex jams. The cartoon version of what that looks like. This is, kind of like a standard drawing that I might submit with a permit that I do to permit our methods. And another stream that we're working on, this is up in McKean County. There's a number of lessons that I'm going to go over in this this structure here. But so the tree that is leaning out over the stream, that's a hemlock tree. It's going to become the upstream log, or the upstream anchor tree in a pinning structure. Towards the center of the photo on the other side of the stream, there is a floodplain chute that we're trying to access, and then just downstream of that there's an old railroad berm. Instead of trying to bring in heavy equipment to take that berm out, we're trying to use a natural low impact method to raise the stream bed. And also through pinning on this bank hemlock, we're going to try to start pushing the water that way before it even gets there. And this photo is taken to show, the importance of putting that slash in there. For folks that are more familiar with fish and boat style structures, all that slash is the filter fabric. It catches the sediment in the leaf pack and starts building your bed for you. So this is that structure from a slightly different view. We brought in the maple tree that's running off to the right-hand side of the stream, where it's pinned on the hemlock that was leaning out over the stream. Added a few more stems in there, as well as the 2 hemlock stems for ballast and elevation. And we went away from this really patting ourselves on the back, thinking, man, I can't wait to come back in a couple of months and see what some flood flows, how they make this stream change and reaccess and develop more habitat here. Failing to take into account the dispersed use campsite that was a couple 100 feet away. When people see wood on the ground and in streams, they think, oh, well, that's downed wood. I can just, cut that up for the campfire. And it kind of breaks my heart a little to see this, because not only did they waste our time and money that we put into making this structure, it's going to flush downstream and it'll still be in the system, but I had high hopes for that particular project area. And that brings me to make sure this is something that folks know about. You might want to include putting up signs like this. I'd be happy to share this file with you that you can send to a printing company. We got ours printed on double-sided metal signs, or it's like 2 pieces of thin metal, and then there's a little bit of some kind of plastic in between there. But we'll put them up on like fence posts and stuff in the areas where we're doing these projects, and to get people thinking the importance of trees to streams, and don't cut them. So I'd be happy to share that with you guys, and just take into account the human element as you plan these projects. And then some of our other work that we've done is leveraging opportunities wherever we can. This is planned road decommissioning. You can see the Forest Service road there on the left-hand side of the stream that runs up the stream valley. We thought, if the road is going to be decommissioned and recontoured, why don't we try to do some stream work while we're in there? We're going to be taking some trees out. So we designed a series of jams to be installed with an excavator to help the stream gain elevation and access the floodplain on the left descending bank, as well as push water away from all of the recently disturbed earth coming from the recontouring. So that's what we did. Used some native boulders and just trees that were on site there. During construction, this is kind of the most upstream end of it, where the stream really would hit that disturbed earth for the first time. This is the bones of the structure. In the center, just to the right of me there, you can see a large root wad, and then we have several tree bowls. We have some for toe protection, some to help start pushing water flows to the opposite bank. We took the excavator and gathered up a bunch of the slash that we'd topped off of some of those bowls and some of the beach brush we had to cut for access, and rammed it down in there. When I do projects by hand, we just do this with a bunch of volunteers and do it by hand. A sawyer goes through, cuts beach brush, and there's a line of people acting like beavers taking it to the stream to lace it in as many different orientations as you can into your structure. And a couple months later, it's going to start catching leaf pack. You might have some flood flows where it starts to accumulate sediment, and you can already see the thoweg of that stream bouncing out to the other side, starting to carve a little bit of a new channel for itself. So another consideration for you is, if you're thinking about doing these projects, is how are you going to monitor your success? We do a channel unit survey on many of our stream sections where we're planning to do this. That's going through and looking at the number of riffles, runs, pools, how deep they are, wide they are, how much wood is in the system. There's a protocol that was developed in the Pacific Northwest for that, and then we adapted it to our region. Doing backpack electrofishing and seeing your whole fish community in there, you might ideally be trying to work for brook trout or brown trout or whatever you're into, but there's something to be said for species diversity too. Do this. I like to think about this in a watershed scale and encourage you to as well. Some simple ways, if you might not have access to backpack electrofishing, is doing red surveys, walking your stream in September and October. I'd encourage you to get out every other week or so, starting in mid-September, and looking for trout reds. I'm studying how the trout are interacting with canopy cover as related to their breeding behavior for reds. No data yet. I'm just collecting pre-data before we go in and do that, or go in and do work on the stream that we're looking at. Also, piece mobility. Everybody always asks, how mobile are these pieces going to be? Well, they're as mobile as you want to make them. And I'm looking at studying it statistically to see how it's going to be. And then also the wetlands on your valley floors. If you're doing this in a system that moves material, you're going to be changing stream bed elevations, raising water tables, and you might get some wetland development as well. So talking with Eric over the past month or so through email, him telling me a little bit about your potential project on, I believe it's Tank Creek there. A couple of the things that always jump to my mind when I'm getting into the planning phases of one of these projects is, in my area, we have a ton of pipelines. And the joke is that if you're not smelling natural gas, you're not in the national forest. If you have one of those in your reach, it's something to consider. If you have a log that breaks free and breaks that, you may be liable. Road and railroad crossings, making structures that are going to be secure and not break free and clog those, or are they passable for trees? The bankful widths that are present naturally on your stream, do you have floodplains there? Do you see a lot of material moving, like cobble, boulder, gravel, sand during flood events? Is this a stream that is some whitewater club's private nirvana? If it is, you're going to have to talk to them, because essentially putting these in, you're putting in a bunch of strainers. I approach this differently in my area versus how I would approach something like this down by Ohio Pile State Park, where it's whitewater. And also, just anecdotally, I've seen when we put these structures in, we get a lot of really great pool development, and you get a lot more larger brown trout using those large pools. And I do see a bump in the brook trout population, but you got to work to find them. So I can either leave this slide up with my contact information or go back to address some of those, whatever you all would like, or just close out of it and go back to forum.
Well, you can just leave it open for now. We'll see if that brings up. We have one question so far. Connor Reynolds has asked, is there any techniques for tributaries where there is a natural flow and then a backflow due to dam release, like basically a dual flow stream? And I'm going to turn on, or at least try to. I'm going to invite Connor to turn on his mic now. No. If you'd like to, so that you get, if you want to expand on that.
Yes, it was just a question for Luke. Have you ever done restoration work where basically you have the natural flow coming down and then you have a upflow from a dam release? And with that, what are some techniques that you would use, because you basically don't have one direction of the flow, you actually have like a dual flow, so it's coming back and forth based on when the tailwater is actually releasing water.
I've only ever seen that in one area that's been downstream of the Kinzua Dam, and that was in a pretty developed area, so we weren't using these techniques. And honestly, that's pretty stumpy for me to think about how you would do that. If you were doing it all by hand, I would think you'd want a pretty mature riparian zone where you would have to design a structure pretty heavily that would be laced in between existing trees, and that would withstand flow from either direction. It would be really interesting, and if you ever do it, I want to see it.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, is like when you build something, you want it to stay there, obviously, for all the purposes you just mentioned in your presentation, for trout habitat, for ensuring sediment is not moving downstream. So all those things are good, and so it's just a bit tricky to keep it all into place whenever you have a dual flow system. So I'll keep you in the loop. We're still thinking about it, but thanks for answering it.
Either that or use heavy equipment and a lot of rock.
All right, we got another question here from Bill Leonard. He's actually the same question I have, is what kind of permitting is required? And Bill, if you want to unmute yourself to continue the conversation, feel free.
Yeah, just curious, Luke, on what type of permitting from the Conservation District or Fish and Boat Commission or whatever.
Is your conservation district delegated?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then you should be able to just use GP1 like you'd be doing for fish and boat structures. I would include definitely an extra page or two of descriptions of like maybe some safety factor analysis that you might be taking into consideration, and also how you're gonna implement it. We initially, in developing these a couple years ago, it's like 6 years ago, we started using restoration waivers. But talking to Fish and Boat Commission and DEP, we've got them on board with using GP1s with it. It may require them coming out to the site and doing a site assessment with you also, so that they're comfortable with what you're doing out there.
And typically the way our local conservation district looks at it is, if the Fish Commission approves us using it, they're just reviewing it from a construction sequencing and ENS standpoint. hopefully I helped you a little bit, Bill.
Yeah, you answered the question. Thanks.
Okay. Next up, Ivers asks the stream size where you wouldn't employ this type of structure. And Ivers, please feel free if you want to open your mic up.
All right, thanks, Eric. So is there a stream size, two-part question, because I threw in another one below it. Does stream size affect if you would do this or not? Like, would you do this on a small stream?
Yes. Small streams are much easier to
Okay.
implement the technique on. Once you get over 40 feet in bank full width, you really want to consider using heavy equipment, because it takes a piece that's 2 times the bank full width, and a lot of the time we don't have a tree of good enough integrity for 80 feet long to be
Right.
a key piece in that stream.
And then if you're changing the floodplain topography, do you have to forecast that for permitting?
We have not had to, because this technique done in this way is meant for remote areas that are, you know, for the most part managed as wild areas. So we haven't had to. If we would be doing this in a developed floodplain, I would be extremely hesitant to do it in a developed floodplain. You would want to do a floodplain analysis then, yes.
So basically saying,
that covers both of them.
Yep. So basically, as long as you keep it in a small stream, you don't have to get into the extra HEC-RAS or any of the more complicated studies.
Right. And I mean, there's in our area, we're fortunate enough that we have like larger streams with wilder floodplains, you know, that might be 2-3 miles to a bridge downstream. Do you guys have things like that in your region coverage area?
Yeah, we have stuff that will work that way with, yes. Okay. Next question, Dennis Wolford. Want to first thank you for an interesting presentation. He had a question on the parameters you use to evaluate success in a treated area. On average, do you see statistically significant changes in mean water depth or mean temperature as a result of the treatment? And if so, how much on average do you typically see? And Dennis, I will allow you to open up your mic and go ahead, and if you want to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was just interested in how you measure success or change from baseline as a result of a treated area.
All depends on what we're looking to do at that site. Sometimes, especially in remote areas, we're looking to just get a bunch of trees in the stream. And I mean, as long as we have some catcher jams at the bottom, I don't really care how they sort themselves out. They're going to sort themselves out into a natural way, and we've reintroduced wood to the system. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. I'm looking at measuring biomass and what increases we're going to see in species numbers and diversity for fish. I haven't had a chance to analyze last year's data yet, but also for pools, I have those numbers in another presentation. I want to say we've seen them, some of them double in depth, and I want to see a 2/3 increase in number of pools through the reaches that we've monitored.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question here from Stefan. He would like to know, is there a rule of thumb how large a tree in diameter you would have to use for the structures?
Yep, I like to have something that's, I mean, 8 to 10 inches is probably my minimum diameter for key pieces. Sometimes I have to fell, say, a couple of smaller trees that are like, you know, your sapling brush up to 4 or 6 inches, but that becomes the slash in my structure and also provides the hole in the canopy so that I can drop the larger trees in. Bigger streams require a larger diameter, but I would say something up to like maybe 15 foot of bank full you could get by with a 10-inch diameter tree being a stable piece, as long as it was, you know, at least twice a bank full. And then once you start to get bigger than that, I would say move up to like 15 to 20 inch being your key pieces. Now you can still include smaller ones on those streams, but make sure you have them secured with something big that's wedged in place.
Oh, okay. Next up, we have Bill has a question. It was too long for him to type, so I'll just let Bill open his mic up and ask the question.
Hi, Luke. I know that this is a fairly new technique, or at least it's new to me. And it was my understanding that, and again, I'm viewing this on a phone, so I can't necessarily see the pictures that well, that when you drop the trees, they're dropped at kind of maybe some kind of an angle to create like almost a deflector type device. But are you saying that you actually drop them across the stream, like perpendicular to the flow?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I'll drop one straight up the channel. Sometimes I'll put them at an angle. Sometimes it's perpendicular or even at a downward angle. Sometimes it's dictated by what I can safely fell. But like I say, we do these in wild areas, and if there is a bit of movement, that's okay. Sometimes we put them in and want them to move.
Food and drink.
Only reason I ask is, you know, the natural ones that I see in my experience going perpendicular to the flow, they might increase the water height on the upstream side, but they decrease the flow downstream. And to me, it looks like they just become a big trash catcher and silt catcher upstream.
That's part of their natural function in the stream. Sometimes is to hold that water back. If you think about it from a floodplain groundwater perspective, they're backwatering, and that water is going into the floodplain. And usually when you have the flood events, it's pouring over that log and it's digging out a big plunge pool on the bottom.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, Stefan. Any potential issues we need to be mindful of, like structures causing unintentional erosion problems?
Keep yourself like 3 or 4 meander bends upstream of infrastructure. Make sure that you're putting in catcher structures. Make sure that you have at least a third, if not more, of the pieces in your jams that you're making are key pieces. Multiplicity and diversity is complexity is stability in these structures. So when I go to put one in, I put the slash in, and then I'll put, you know, an average of 2 to 4, sometimes 5 trees is one jam. And then I walk 100, 150 feet upstream, and I put another one in like that. So having that complexity and laced into a healthy riparian area, you know, maybe some of the stumps that leave them as high stumps so they catch material, and it'll be a lot more stable of a structure.
Okay, we just have a comment here from Don Miller for a great presentation, Luke. Anyone else who has any questions, type some random letters into there and I will get to you. Oh, here we go, Don Miller. Do you prefer live trees, or in areas with now dead or dying hemlocks and ash? Are dead dying trees also suitable for use? Don, feel free to key your mic up.
I really try to stay away from anything snaggy or dead. I had a harrowing experience earlier in my sawyering career where I was cutting down a beech tree with a split in it, and the split was like 10 feet up the tree, and I cut, and I wasn't even finished cutting, and one side went, and then the other side went, and neither of them went where I thought they were going to go, and so that was it was unsafe, and it was I thought it was going to be fine, but it wasn't. And also looking at it from a purely construction standpoint, when you go to build something, you want the highest quality materials that you can find. So I like live trees. I like live hemlocks the best. We have a bunch of them up here. We haven't really been impacted by adelgid in the areas that I'm working in. Hemlock has great rot resistance, especially when you get it down in the stream and buried. They stay there for a really long time. I try to stay away from snags as much as I can, unless I need to fell one to safely fell, to get, a good tree into the stream. And also just from a wildlife habitat perspective, snags make great habitat for birds and squirrels and all kinds of other stuff.
Thank you, Luke. I was just asking the question because we are in an area where we're pretty heavily infestated with hemlock woolly adelgid, and so sacrificing live trees is often a difficult decision to make. And we also now are impacted significantly by emerald ash borers, and I understand the hazards of cutting down widowmakers, but some of our trees are alive, but in another year or 2 years, they'll be gone. So that's why I was asking the question. We've looked at doing some work on Tank Creek, as you mentioned, and there are places there where I would prefer to take ash and hemlock that are dying rather than take out healthy ones or living ones. So that's why I ask.
I think I would rather take the dying hemlock over the dying ash, just because of the decay rate of ash. That they're probably going to be pulp in a couple years. But if you've got hemlocks that are still somewhat alive, it might be a really great opportunity to kind of, make lemonade out of lemons that somebody hucked at you.
Right. And just one other follow-up. So Tank Creek, for instance, has scoured 55 flood, and subsequent flooding has scoured its stream channel to be some places 10 feet below what was the normal pre-flood flow. So we have deeper U-shaped stream channels, and some of the trees that drop naturally end up bridging across that valley. So would you cut one side so that it could drop into the stream valley instead of bridging?
Sometimes we do that, yeah. If this is something you're potentially looking to get into, I think I was, for my full grip hoist setup, I think I'm in for like $3,400 or $3,600. So, I mean, it's expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like way cheaper than a little mini excavator. So winching those around to a more preferable position might be the best way to go. I've seen a lot of wood that's been cut to get it in the stream move, and I'm hesitant to encourage it too much.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jacob Smith has a brook trout question. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Jacob, and ask your question.
Hi. So I'm here with the Native Fish Coalition. We were thinking about possibly helping out here. And our question is, have you done projects like this in the past on mixed brook brown streams, and then seen a difference in having more brook trout or versus the brown trout with harvest on there yet?
I've done them on mixed population streams, and a lot of times it seems like the browns are out competing the brooks. But as the stream gets smaller, it's less impactful, a little bit more harmonious living. And then as the stream gets even smaller, the brook trout seem to like it a lot better.
Had you guys done any management for that for brook trout in a sense of harvesting brown trout, or it's not nearly as common in the eastern side, but like the western side of rote noting when you have above a impound?
I haven't, we haven't done any of that, and from the fisheries biologists that I've talked to, I haven't seen it done in Pennsylvania, and I don't expect to see it done.
No, not the rote noting part. That's definitely out, but more of the possibility of is when you put this habit in streams that are 5-6 years ago were completely brook trout that are becoming dominated. I've seen some stock streams that I've looked at that were stocked and didn't have any sort of native brook trout population that went to, when they were getting stocked, then they were keeping everything, and the brookies were actually starting to come back just because of the harvest of the browns. I was just interested to see if you guys had done any of that.
No, we have not. But you're saying that the brookies were doing better under harvest conditions than non-harvest conditions.
Yes, and it was because I'm in a southern area compared to these guys. I'm from the Schuylkill County area, and one of the streams that I had kind of looked at for a while is they had stocked the stream, and then the upper bounds of it tended to get more brookies because I always thought it was because they were keeping a lot of the browns out down lower, and then once they stopped the stocking down lower, people weren't coming there with their worms to catch their limit, so to speak. So then the browns pushed all the way up. It was just one stream that I've seen it. I'm not familiar with it enough yet. I'm still in school for environmental engineering, so I'm not completely up to that yet. But it was one thing I saw, and I wanted to see if anyone else had kind of seen that.
That's interesting.
It's right, because it's completely against anything I ever worked for, was to stop stocking to return to the native population. But it was one of those, the stream was just so heavily harvested that the browns never were kept under control. The larger browns stayed back, but then once the stocking stopped, the larger browns would kept pushing up further and further, and then subsequently took out brookie populations until they got to the next log jam impairment about a quarter mile away up.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Jacob. Okay. Quick comment from Melissa. I'm not even going to try to butcher your last name. Thank you for allowing me to sit in on the awesome presentation. I never thought about the importance of wooden streams before. Okay, and then we go to Ivers. He's asking, have you used a lower cost come along block and tackle setup? Ivers, feel free to unmute your mic if you want to.
I think that the capstan is a little bit more economical.
Okay.
Maybe $2,000 to $2,500 you could probably get set up with that for it, but you're going to burn through rope quickly, especially if you don't have experience rigging. We burned through a couple of ropes and a couple of grip hoist cables in our first couple years of doing this. I haven't tried like a beefy come along. One thing I like about the grip hoist is it's non-spooling. It free feeds through that grip hoist. So we have a 150-foot cable and we have a 60-foot cable. I like the 60-foot cable, and then I pair it with a purple plasma rope that's the same diameter, but it's got a 30,000-pound breaking strength versus a 20,000-pound breaking strength on the cable, and it's a lot lighter. And we just tie a bowline in it, and attach the grip hoist cable to it, and then just, you know, work our way up the rope if we need to. I've tried, it's called a tree puller, a Mazdam tree puller. We had one of our volunteers bring it in, and I think he got it from Harbor Freight. And within the first 2 hours of trying it, I exceeded the safety rating on it, and the safety measure failed, and then it wouldn't work, and I was disappointed.
Right.
But I
All
think
right.
those are primarily for like directing a tree away from a building that you're falling versus trying to drag a log along the ground.
Right.
All right.
All
I'm
right.
going to
Thank you.
thank you, Ivan. Okay, I'm going to give Don Miller his two questions back to back. His first one is, you put in your contact information, so Don's first one, so I'll give you the second one. How are your work teams organized? One Sawyer and how many assistants per team? And how do you sequence the work?
I like to have, if I'm doing just chop and drop, I probably work 2 teams of Sawyers, or you can have as many as you can. You want to be like 2.5 tree lengths away from each other working in the woods. And if you have like 2 or more teams of Sawyers, sometimes that can get confusing in the woods, at least from a safety perspective. Be incredibly aware of everything. But a Sawyer and then like 2 or 3 swampers. So you'll have that Sawyer go and say cut a bunch of beech brush and put that into the creek, or maybe cut a couple of smaller trees and buck them down into carryable pieces that still have all the branches on them, so you're getting your fines in there, and then fell 2 or 3 trees on top of that mess to make it stable and stay there.
All right. You have anything to add to that, Don, or are you good? All right, I'm going to move on to Stefan. Stefan asked if have you ever done before and after electrofishing to measure the success of improvements?
Yes, that's that data that I'm looking forward to seeing once I have a minute to analyze it. And we're working with several universities on a watershed scale study, and one of them are doing pretty in-depth before and afters. We're collecting 2 years of pre-data and then going into construction this summer for it. So hopefully in 3 years, I'll have really awesome data to show you. I know in Vermont and West Virginia, from just grip hoist projects alone, they've seen 150% increase in wild trout biomass like 3 years after they go in and do a project. I want to know how they're doing that, because man, is it a bear to electrofish those sites. And if you're considering doing electrofishing before and after on your projects, I encourage you to have overkill on your equipment so that your pre and post data are able to communicate through the methodologies. Like if you think it's a small stream that's, one electrofisher will fish any pool in that section, you might want to take 2 just in case.
Okay. Connor Reynolds has asked about, have you ever anchored wood into the ground bank, natural or man-made anchor? Sorry if I missed this earlier.
Yes. A lot of times when I'm working with that grip hoist, we'll take and put a pencil point onto one of our, the end of the tree, and then put the pulley on the tree, have an anchor point and another pulley, and try to jam it in as far as it goes. I've seen, if you get nice fine sediment banks, you can jam a tree like 10, 12 feet back into the bank without doing any excavation at all. But I've never used any sort of like earth anchors that you might, send in with a jackhammer and a rod and cable or anything like that.
And I can tell you in this area, those aren't all that effective because you're working in nothing but glacial till. So
that's what I thought.
All right. Next up, Don Miller. Have you ever used any grant funds for this work?
Almost all of it is grant funds. Some of it has been stewardship funding from the National Forest. So like when they do a timber sale, a portion of that money goes back to that forest and can be used for conservation work. So sometimes we'll contract with a heavy equipment operator to come do that type of work for us. But we've used Coldwater Heritage Partnership funding for these projects. National Forest Foundation, we've applied a couple times to Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture and haven't gotten those. And then there was a list of funders that I put up towards the beginning of the presentation, who have all had a hand in one way or another in funding this work.
Thank you, Luke. I know that I've done some reading on the work that's being done in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, the Trout Unlimited coordinator there, and they had a pretty significant funding source from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. I think it was 1.8 million across 2 years. That included some, small low-head dam removal and other things too. But I was just curious if you had tapped any federal funds at all for some of the work.
Yep.
Okay. Not seeing more questions. I'll ask the one important question. Do you have any problems with us making this presentation available to other people that weren't able to make this meeting?
Nope.
Thank you. There's the legal part of this discussion. All right. Giving another 15 seconds for someone to start typing really, really fast.
Luke, I will be in touch with you. Eric G and Eric B and I will be talking more about the project that we want to do here, hopefully starting this year for a small section of the stream to try it out. And so I will be in touch with you some more. Thank you for sharing this evening with us.
Yeah. Do you guys know Phil Thomas with National TU or PATU? I think he's employed by National TU, but I mean, he's based out of Lock Haven. Phil is an impressive sawyer and has done this work. It may be worthwhile getting in contact with him. He may be more available to come do a site assessment with you guys and provide you guys some advice on site, and just something to think about. And Phil's a great guy.
And he's with National TU?
And he's stationed, yeah, I have his contact information somewhere.
Okay, good, Eric, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
If you want me to, I can do an introduction between you guys, say an email with everybody and say, hey, please get in touch.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. It would be great to have someone with some experience with this to come and give us a walkthrough or a look through and see what we have and how practical it is.
Yep.
All right. Well, seeing no more questions, I thank everyone for coming, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Luke, for everything. This has been awesome.
Yep. Happy
Thanks,
to.
Luke.
Yeah, great job, Luke.
Thank you.